stoic protector, the billionaire Marcus Thorne, returned from a 3-week business summit in Tokyo only to be paralyzed by the sight of his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, in a horrific situation of silent, hollowed-out neglect. She was curled in the corner of her lavishly decorated bedroom, a room filled with every toy a child could desire, yet she clutched a single, worn-out sock, her eyes vacant and her small frame alarmingly thin beneath her designer pajamas. Isabella, his wife of 2 years and Lily's stepmother, met his shocked gaze with a practiced, saccharine smile, explaining away the child's state as a stubborn flu she just couldn't seem to shake. Why would a child be caged by fear in her own mother's house? A gilded cage of pink and lace that had become a prison of the soul. And who truly deserves to be brought into the light of truth when the darkest shadows lurk behind the most polished facades? The air in the sprawling penthouse was the first warning. It was stale, heavy with the scent of wilting flowers and chemical air freshener, a cloying combination that failed to mask an underlying sourness. Marcus, a man whose life was a fortress of precision and order, felt the wrongness of it in his bones. He had built this empire, this home, as a sanctuary for Lily after her mother's tragic death 4 years ago. It was supposed to be a place of light, of warmth, of unwavering security. Now it felt corrupted, like a beautiful photograph with a creeping stain at its edge. The usual sounds of a home filled with life were absent. There was no gentle hum of the nanny's movements, no distant laughter from Lily's playroom, no cheerful clatter from the kitchen. There was only a profound, suffocating silence that seemed to press in on him from all sides. He set his briefcase down, the soft click of the latches echoing unnaturally in the grand foyer. "Isabella?" he called out, his voice tight. "Lily? I'm home." Isabella appeared at the top of the sweeping marble staircase, a vision in a silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. "Marcus, darling, you're early. We weren't expecting you until this evening." Her voice was smooth, a practiced melody of surprise and delight, but her eyes didn't quite match. They held a flicker of something else, something guarded and cold that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "How was the trip? Did you close the deal?" She descended the stairs, her movements fluid and graceful, a performance of wifely devotion. He allowed her to kiss his cheek, the scent of her expensive perfume another layer in the house's strange, artificial atmosphere. "The trip was a success," he said, his focus already past her. "Where's Lily? Is she sleeping?" A shadow of annoyance crossed Isabella's face before being replaced by a look of maternal concern. "Oh, the poor thing has been under the weather. A nasty little bug. She's been resting in her room most of the day. The doctor said it just needs to run its course." A lie. He knew it was a lie, though he couldn't yet articulate how. The internal alarm that had served him so well in the cutthroat world of international business was screaming. He brushed past her, his long strides eating up the distance to his daughter's room. "I want to see her." Isabella's voice followed him, a sharp edge beneath the honeyed tone. "Marcus, don't wake her. She needs her rest." He ignored her. His hand closed around the cool brass of Lily's doorknob. It was locked. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, pierced through him. He rattled it once, then again. "Isabella, why is this door locked?" He turned to face her, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. She waved a dismissive hand, a faint, nervous tremor in her fingers. "Oh, it's a new thing. She's been sleepwalking." The child specialist suggested it was for her own safety, to keep her from wandering the penthouse at night. The explanation was plausible, almost reasonable, but it felt utterly wrong. Felt like a cage. His jaw clenched. He didn't need a key. He lowered his shoulder and hit the door with the full force of his body. The wood splintered around the lock, the sound of violent crack in the oppressive silence. The door flew open, and there, in the dim light of the room, he saw her. The sight of his daughter, small and lost in the vastness of her own bedroom, shattered the last of his composure. This was not the aftermath of a simple flu. This was the landscape of a soul in eclipse. He took a step into the room, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. A tray of untouched food sat on a small table, a skin formed over the soup, a piece of toast curled and dry. The air was thick with the scent of sickness and sorrow. Lily didn't look up. She didn't run to him, didn't cry out, "Daddy," as she always did. She simply remained in her corner, rocking almost imperceptibly. Her world shrunk to the size of a threadbare sock she twisted in her tiny hands. He knelt before her, his movements slow, deliberate, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Lily," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Sweetheart, it's Daddy. I'm home." Her eyes, large and dark in her pale face, finally lifted to meet his. But there was no recognition in them, no spark of joy. There was only a deep, desolate fear. He saw the faint, yellowish bruise on her cheekbone, almost hidden by the shadows. He saw the way her small wrists seemed to disappear into the cuffs of her pajamas. He saw the raw, chapped skin around her lips, as if she had been crying for days on end. A quiet, protective rage began to build within him, a cold fire that burned away all thought, all reason, leaving only a single, unshakable purpose. He would burn down the world to find out who had done this to her. He scooped her into his arms. She was terrifyingly light, a fragile bird with broken wings. She didn't cling to him. She remained stiff, a stranger in his embrace. He turned, his gaze falling on Isabella, who stood in the doorway, her face a mask of manufactured shock. "She fell," Isabella said quickly, her voice a little too high, "playing by the bookshelf. She's so clumsy." Marcus said nothing. He walked past her, carrying his daughter, his silence more damning than any accusation. The protector had returned. The investigation had begun. He didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge Isabella's frantic stream of excuses and feigned concern that trailed behind him like a poisonous vapor. His only focus was the fragile weight in his arms and the rhythmic, shallow breaths she took against his chest. He carried her through the cold, opulent halls of the home that was no longer a home, down the private elevator, and into the sterile silence of the underground garage. He placed Lily gently into her car seat in the back of his Bentley, her small body barely making an impression on the plush leather. She stared out the window, her expression unchanged, her eyes fixed on something he couldn't see. He drove with a controlled, surgical precision, navigating the city streets with an icy calm that belied the inferno raging within him. Every red light was an eternity, every horn honk a personal affront. He was a man of immense power, a titan of industry who could move markets with a single phone call. Yet in that moment, he had never felt so utterly helpless. The emergency room of the city's top private hospital was a place of controlled chaos, but for Marcus Thorne, it became a silent, focused bubble. He swept in, Lily held tight against him, and the sheer force of his presence parted the crowds. "My daughter needs a doctor. Now," he stated, his voice low and resonant with an authority that brooked no argument. They were ushered into a private examination room immediately. A nurse, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, began the initial assessment. She took Lily's temperature, checked her pulse. Her gentle questions met with the same profound silence from the child. Lily flinched when the nurse tried to examine the bruise on her cheek, a small, involuntary movement that spoke volumes. Marcus stood sentinel in the corner of the room, his hands clenched into fists, his entire being a coiled spring of protective fury. He watched every interaction, cataloging every detail, every hesitation, every flicker of fear in his daughter's eyes. Then Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation, a coincidence that felt like a strange twist of fate, entered the room. He was a tall, sharp-featured man in his late 40s, with an air of quiet competence that Marcus recognized immediately. He introduced himself and began his examination, his demeanor calm and reassuring. He spoke to Lily in a soft, even tone, explaining everything he was doing before he did it. "I'm just going to listen to your heart, Lily. It's going to be a little cold." He warmed the stethoscope with his hand before placing it on her chest. Marcus watched the doctor's face intently. He saw the initial professional concern shift subtly into something deeper, more troubled. Dr. Thorne noted the child's low body weight, the signs of dehydration, the listlessness that went far beyond a simple flu. He gently palpated her abdomen, his brow furrowed in concentration. He checked her reflexes, which were sluggish. He shone a light into her eyes, which remained dull and unresponsive. The silence in the room stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Dr. Thorne completed his physical examination and then turned to Marcus, his expression grave. "Mr. Thorne, I'd like to speak with you privately for a moment. The nurse will stay with Lily." He led Marcus into the hallway, the door clicking softly shut behind them. The doctor's professional facade remained, but his eyes held a stark, human concern. "Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice measured, "your daughter is suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition. The bruise on her cheek is non-accidental. It's consistent with a direct impact, not a simple fall. Her listlessness and unresponsiveness are symptoms of what we call resignation syndrome, a state often seen in children who have experienced profound and prolonged trauma or neglect." Each word was a hammer blow, confirming the horrors Marcus had only dared to imagine. He felt a wave of nausea, a cold sweat on his brow. Trauma, neglect. The words echoed in the sterile corridor, ugly and obscene. "Her stepmother said she had the flu," Marcus managed to say, his voice a raw whisper. The doctor's gaze was unflinching. "This is not the flu, Mr. Thorne. Based on her physical and psychological state, I have a statutory duty to report this. I am legally and morally obligated to contact Child Protective Services and the police. I've already had my nurse make the call." The statement was delivered not as a question or a request, but as a fact. It was the moment the private horror became a public matter. The moment the gears of justice, slow and impersonal, began to turn. For a brief second, Marcus felt a surge of indignation. The intrusion, the assumption, but it was instantly extinguished by a wave of profound, gut-wrenching gratitude. This man, this doctor, saw the truth. He was not swayed by the Thorne name or the wealth it represented. He saw a child who was suffering, and he acted. Marcus simply nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He looked through the small window in the door at his daughter, sitting alone on the examination table, a tiny, lost figure in a world that had failed her. A vow took root in his soul, a promise forged in the cold fire of his rage and the depths of his love. He would not rest. He would not falter. He would tear down every lie, expose every secret, and destroy the person responsible for extinguishing the light in his daughter's eyes. The doctor had made the first call. Marcus would ensure it was not the last. He would become the righteous storm Isabella never saw coming. Lily was admitted to the pediatric wing, placed in a quiet room with a large window overlooking a small garden. And Four-Line was started to rehydrate her, the tiny needle in her hand a stark symbol of her vulnerability. Marcus refused to leave her side. He sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair by her bed, a silent guardian, watching the slow, steady drip of the saline solution as if it were the most important process in the world. He watched the subtle rise and fall of her chest, reassuring himself with every breath she took. The hospital hummed around them, the distant beep of machines, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes, the hushed voices in the hallway. But inside the room, a sacred silence held sway. It was in this sterile, quiet space that Marcus Thorne's grief and shock coalesced into something harder, something infinitely more dangerous. Purpose. He looked at his daughter's face, pale and still in the dim light, and the vow he had made in the hallway solidified into a creed. He would become her voice. He would become her shield. He would dismantle the life of the woman who did this, piece by painful piece, until nothing was left but the ugly truth of what she was. His fortune, his influence, his formidable intellect, they were no longer tools for building a corporate empire. They were now weapons to be deployed in a singular, righteous war. He would not fail. He could not. Lily's life, her very soul, depended on it. Just after midnight, the quiet of the room was broken by a soft knock. The door opened to reveal Isabella, her face a carefully constructed mask of anguish. She had changed into a somber cashmere sweater and tailored slacks, her makeup reapplied to look tastefully distressed. She carried a large, fluffy teddy bear, a prop in her one-woman play. "Marcus," she whispered, rushing to the bedside. "Oh, my poor baby. I was so worried. I came as soon as I heard." She reached out to touch Lily's forehead, but Marcus's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was not violent, but it was as unyielding as steel. "Don't touch her," he said, his voice flat and devoid of all emotion. The coldness in his tone was more terrifying than any shout. Isabella's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear finally breaking through her performance. She tried to pull her wrist away, but he held fast. "Marcus, what is wrong with you? I'm her mother. You are her stepmother," he corrected her, the words like chips of ice. "And you will not touch her again." He released her wrist, and she stumbled back, rubbing the spot where his fingers had been. Her expression shifted from fear to indignation. "How dare you? I have done nothing but love that child." She had a fall, Marcus. Terrible fall. She hit her head against the corner of her dresser. "I was right there. I caught her before it could be worse. The doctor is overreacting. They always do. They see a bruise on a child from a wealthy family and immediately think the worst." Her words tumbled out. A practiced, plausible narrative. It was the perfect lie, simple, emotional, and designed to prey on the chaos of the moment. It painted her as the hero, the concerned parent fighting against a paranoid system. She even managed to produce a single, perfect tear that traced a path down her cheek. "She's been so withdrawn since it happened," she continued, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "It was a shock to her system. That's all this is. A bad scare. Any other man might have wavered, might have seen a sliver of doubt. But Marcus had seen his daughter's eyes. He had felt the profound wrongness in his home. He had heard the doctor's unwavering diagnosis. Isabella's performance was flawless, but he could see the cracks in the facade, the desperation churning beneath the surface. He remained silent, letting her words hang in the air, their falseness echoing in the quiet room. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He simply looked at her, his gaze cold and penetrating, stripping away her layers of deception until only the ugly, squirming truth remained. He knew with absolute certainty that he was looking at a monster. Her performance faltered under his unblinking stare. The tears stopped. The feigned worry evaporated, replaced by a defensive glare. "I am not going to be treated like a criminal in my own family, Marcus. When Lily is better, you and I will have a serious discussion about your behavior." She turned and swept out of the room, her exit as dramatic as her entrance. Marcus watched her go, the cold fire in his gut burning hotter. The lie had been delivered. The battle lines were drawn. And he knew, with a chilling clarity, that this was just the beginning. The gaslighting was her first move. His would be far more methodical and infinitely more devastating. The following days were a blur of legal and logistical maneuvers. Marcus used his considerable influence to have a court order expedited, granting him temporary emergency custody of Lily and a restraining order against Isabella, barring her from the hospital and any contact with the child. His legal team, led by his most trusted counsel, David Chun, descended upon the case with the ferocity of a wolf pack. They handled the initial inquiries from Child Protective Services, providing them with Dr. Thorne's detailed medical report and Marcus's own testimony. The penthouse, once a home, was now a sealed piece of evidence, a place Marcus had no intention of ever returning to. While the legal machinery ground forward, Lily began a slow, fragile recovery. The color returned to her cheeks, and the haunted look in her eyes began to recede, replaced by a deep, watchful stillness. She still wasn't speaking, but she would now meet his gaze, her small hand occasionally finding his as she slept. Marcus arranged for her to be discharged to a secure, private location. A serene bungalow at a 5-star hotel, surrounded by lush gardens and staffed by a discreet team he had personally vetted, including a highly recommended child therapist. It was in this new, safe space that Marcus began his own quiet investigation. He didn't push Lily to talk about what happened. Instead, he simply created an environment of unconditional safety. He sat with her for hours, reading her favorite stories, his voice a calm, steady rumble. They sat on the floor and worked on puzzles, their hands moving in comfortable silence. One afternoon, the therapist suggested they try drawing. She left them with a large sketchpad and a box of colorful crayons. Marcus drew a clumsy picture of a sun and a house. Lily picked up a black crayon. Her first drawing was a small, stick-figure girl, alone in a dark, square room. A thick, heavy line was drawn across the top of the square, a door with no handle. Marcus felt his throat tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. "That's a very good drawing, sweetheart," he said softly. Over the next few days, the drawings continued. A picture of a woman with a wide, red, smiling mouth that didn't reach her angry, scribbled eyes. A drawing of the little girl crying, with large, exaggerated teardrops falling onto a plate of food she wasn't eating. Each crayon sketch was a silent testimony, a piece of a puzzle that was becoming terrifyingly clear. The locked door, the looming figure of Isabella, the loneliness, the fear. While Lily expressed her trauma on paper, Marcus sought the first piece of external validation. He knew he couldn't rely solely on a child's drawings in a legal battle against a manipulator as skilled as Isabella. He needed a witness. He thought of their neighbors in the penthouse next door, an elderly couple, the Gables. He had only ever exchanged polite pleasantries with them in the elevator. He found their number and called Mrs. Gable, a woman with a gentle, hesitant voice. He asked if he could visit her, explaining only that it was a sensitive family matter. She agreed, her tone laced with a nervous curiosity. He met her in the lobby of her new, more modest apartment building. She had recently downsized after her husband's passing. He saw the fear in her eyes immediately. She was a woman who did not like conflict. "Mr. Thorne," she began, wringing her hands. "I don't know what I can possibly do to help." Marcus spoke to her gently, his tone respectful and calm. He didn't press or demand. He simply explained that he was deeply concerned about Lily's well-being during the time he was away. "Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice earnest, "I know you are a private person, but you live next door. Your walls are shared with my daughter's room. I just need to know if you ever heard anything unusual." The woman hesitated, her gaze darting around the lobby as if Isabella herself might materialize from the shadows. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "She has a temper." "Your wife," Marcus waited, letting the silence draw the story out of her. "I would hear things," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Shouting. Not from you, never from you. Only when you were away. I would hear her yelling at the little one. Horrible things. You're worthless, no one will ever love you. Things a person should never say to a child." Mrs. Gable took a shaky breath. "And the crying. First, there was so much crying. Little Lily would sob for hours. And then one day it just stopped. The yelling continued, but the crying, it was just silence. A different kind of silence. A scarier kind." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and shame. "I should have said something. I should have called someone. But your wife, she can be very charming, but also very intimidating. She made a point of telling me how influential her family was. I was afraid. I'm an old woman, alone. I didn't want to cause trouble." Marcus reached out and placed a hand gently on her arm. "You are not in trouble, Mrs. Gable. You are being very brave. Thank you." Her reluctant testimony was the first brick in the wall of evidence he was building. It corroborated the drawings, the medical report, the deep, instinctual knowledge in his own gut. He now had a voice, however hesitant, to speak for the silence. The foundation was laid. Now he needed the smoking gun. He needed the one piece of undeniable proof that would tear Isabella's carefully constructed world to the ground. The key to everything, he realized, was inside the penthouse. Despite it being a place of dread, a monument to his own failure to see the truth, he knew he had to go back. Armed with the court order granting him temporary exclusive access, he returned to the scene of his daughter's silent suffering. David Chun had advised him to bring a private forensic investigator, but Marcus needed to do this alone. This was personal. The air inside was just as he remembered. Still, cold, and artificial. He walked through the silent rooms, each one a testament to Isabella's impeccable taste and hollow soul. Everything was pristine, polished, and perfectly in its place. A home designed to be photographed, not lived in. He went straight to Lily's room. The splintered doorframe was a raw, jagged wound in the otherwise perfect space. He stood in the center of the room, trying to see it not as a father, but as an investigator. Where would a narcissist hide their secrets? Not somewhere obvious. Somewhere they felt clever, somewhere they felt safe. He bypassed Isabella's office, her dressing room, her jewelry safes. Too predictable. He thought about her habits, her routines, her obsession with wellness and technology. Her smart mirror in the master bathroom, her collection of tablets and laptops, her top-of-the-line home security system. The security system. He had installed it himself years ago, a state-of-the-art network with cameras covering all entrances and common areas. Isabella had always hated it, complaining it felt intrusive. After they were married, she insisted on a new system, one she had chosen, managed by a company her family recommended. She had claimed his old system was outdated. He had acquiesced, another small concession in a long line of them. But had he ever fully decommissioned the old server? He made his way to the small utility closet off the main study, a space filled with routers, servers, and a tangle of wires. And there, tucked away behind the new, sleek server rack for Isabella's system, was the old one. A dusty, black box with a single, faintly blinking green light. He had forgotten all about it. It was still connected, still drawing power, still recording. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, sharp thrill of anticipation. He carefully disconnected the hard drive, his hands surprisingly steady. This was it. He could feel it. He took the drive not to his office, but to a secure, off-site tech lab run by a former military intelligence officer he trusted implicitly. "I need everything on this, Alex," he said, placing the drive on the sterile workbench. "Every file. Deleted, corrupted, everything. And I need it yesterday, Alex." A man of few words and immense skill simply nodded. "Give me 12 hours." The next 12 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He returned to the hotel bungalow, sitting with Lily as she slept, the weight of what the drive might contain pressing down on him. Could be nothing. Could be everything. At 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. It was a single text from Alex. "Done. Link sent to your secure email. I'm sorry, Marcus." The final words sent a chill down his spine. He went into the adjoining room, opened his encrypted laptop, and clicked the link. A folder opened, filled with video files, neatly organized by date and time. They were from a single camera, one he had forgotten he'd even installed. It was a tiny, discreet camera embedded in the smoke detector in Lily's bedroom, placed there years ago to act as a high-tech baby monitor. Isabella's new system had no cameras inside the private rooms, a feature she had insisted upon for privacy. She had never known this one existed. He clicked on the first file from a date 2 weeks prior. The video was clear, the audio crisp. It showed Lily's room, sunlit and cheerful. And then Isabella entered. The woman on the screen was not the charming, polished socialite the world knew. This was a different person entirely. Her face was a mask of cold fury, her voice a low, venomous snarl. He watched in sickening horror as she berated the small child for spilling a drop of juice on the carpet. "You are a stupid, clumsy little girl," the voice on the recording said, dripping with contempt. "Do you have any idea how much this rug costs? You are just like your mother." Useless, he watched as she locked Lily's favorite dolls away in a closet, telling her she was too bad to have them. He watched as she served Lily meals, and then took them away untouched, telling her she didn't deserve to eat because she hadn't been grateful enough. He fast-forwarded through hours of footage, each clip a new layer of hell. He saw her grabbing Lily's arm, her fingers digging in. He saw her forcing the child to stand in a corner for hours on end. He saw her locking the door, plunging the room into darkness, ignoring the child's terrified sobs. And then, the worst part, the silence. He watched the footage from the last few days of his trip. Lily no longer cried. She simply sat in her corner, a small, still figure, her spirit systematically, cruelly being crushed. There was no single, dramatic act of violence. It was worse. It was a meticulous campaign of psychological torture, of emotional starvation, designed to break a child's will and erase her very self. The camera had captured it all. The truth in raw, undeniable, high-definition horror. This was the smoking gun. This was the weapon that would not just win a court case, but utterly annihilate Isabella's existence. Marcus closed the laptop, a profound, glacial calm settling over him. The time for quiet investigation was over. It was time to go to war. He picked up his phone and dialed his lawyer. "David," he said, his voice a blade of cold steel. "I have her. We're going to burn her to the ground." The meeting with David Chun took place in a sterile, soundproof conference room in his downtown law office, a place where fortunes were dismantled and futures were decided. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and fresh coffee. Marcus sat at one end of the long mahogany table, his face carved from stone. David, a sharp, impeccably dressed man whose calm demeanor concealed a brilliant and ruthless legal mind, sat opposite him. Between them, a large monitor glowed, paused on a still image from the video footage. Isabella's face, twisted in a snarl of pure malice. David had just finished watching a curated 10-minute reel of the worst moments. He hadn't spoken a word, his expression growing colder and harder with each passing second. When it was over, he slowly removed his glasses, polished them with a silk cloth, and placed them deliberately on the table. He looked at Marcus, his eyes filled with a quiet, controlled fury that mirrored his client's. "In 25 years of practicing law," David said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I have never seen anything so systematically cruel. This is not just a custody case, Marcus. This is a criminal case of the highest order. Child endangerment, torture, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The list is long. I don't just want her prosecuted, David," Marcus stated, his voice low and guttural. "I want her erased. Her reputation, her social standing, her public image. It was all built on a foundation of lies. I want to bulldoze that foundation and salt the earth where it stood." David nodded slowly, his mind already working, processing angles, strategies, and vulnerabilities. "The videos are the kill shot. They are irrefutable. We could go to the district attorney right now and she would be in handcuffs by lunch. But a criminal trial can be slow, can be messy, can be appealed. And it allows her to control the narrative, to paint herself as a victim of a vengeful husband." He paused, leaning forward. "You said you want to erase her. The legal system will punish her, but it won't necessarily destroy the persona she has so carefully crafted. For a narcissist like Isabella, public humiliation is a fate worse than prison. We need to strip her of her power in the court of public opinion before we hand her over to the court of law." Marcus listened, his respect for David's strategic mind growing. The lawyer wasn't just thinking about winning, he was thinking about total victory. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. David's lips curved into a grim, thin smile. "Isabella's power comes from her image as a philanthropist, a benefactor, a champion of the less fortunate. Her entire social identity is wrapped up in the Thorn Foundation Charity Gala. It's her coronation ball. It's in 2 weeks. She's hosting it. She will be on a stage, in front of everyone who matters in this city, feeling powerful, adored, and untouchable." The plan began to form in the air between them, cold and precise. It was audacious, theatrical, and utterly devastating. They would not leak the video to the press. They would not hand it over to the police just yet. They would hold it. They would prepare. They would gather their other pieces of evidence. A sworn and notarized affidavit from a now courageous Mrs. Gable, the detailed medical report from Dr. Thorne, and the testimony of the child therapist who could expertly articulate the profound trauma Lily had endured. They would weaponize the truth. "We will let her walk onto that stage," David continued, his voice laced with icy purpose. "We will let her soak in the applause. We will let her deliver her speech about compassion and protecting the innocent. And then, Marcus, you will walk out and we will show them all who she really is. We will play the footage on the screens behind her. We will turn her moment of triumph into her public execution. The plan was brutal, but for the man who had seen his child hollowed out from the inside, it felt like righteous, measured justice. It was a strategy that would not only ensure Isabella faced legal consequences but would also utterly demolish the false idol she had built. No one would ever believe her lies again. Her name would become a synonym for monstrous hypocrisy. While you prepare for that, Marcus said, his focus already shifting to the next critical step, I need you to ensure Lily is protected, completely. I want a new trust established, one that Isabella can never touch. I want her name legally removed from all of Lily's records. I want every legal tie she has to my daughter severed with a scalpel. Consider it done. David assured him. We'll draft the paperwork today. By the time that gala begins, Isabella will already be a ghost in Lily's life. She just won't know it yet. They spent the next 2 hours mapping out the logistics. David would coordinate with the event's AV team, ensuring they had a trusted technician in place to override the system at the precise moment. He would have plainclothes police officers discreetly positioned in the ballroom, ready to act once the evidence was revealed. Marcus's role was simple. He would be the instrument of justice. He would walk onto that stage and confront the monster who had slept in his bed and harmed his child. As Marcus left the law office, the city lights twinkling below, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The path ahead was dark and difficult, but it was a straight line. The haunted, solitary man who had returned from Tokyo was gone. In his place stood the protector, armed with undeniable truth and an unbreakable will. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was wait for the monster to walk into it. As Marcus and David meticulously laid the groundwork for her downfall, Isabella began to feel the subtle shift in the balance of power. The restraining order was a humiliation, but one her own lawyers assured her was a temporary, standard procedure in what they were framing as a contentious marital dispute. She was cut off from Marcus's finances, but she had her own substantial family money to draw upon. The real source of her growing unease was the silence. Marcus wasn't fighting her in the press. He wasn't making angry, emotional accusations. He was simply gone. This quiet, strategic withdrawal was more unnerving to her than any open conflict. She knew Marcus. She knew his capacity for cold, calculated action. His silence was not weakness. It was the quiet before a storm. Sensing she was losing control of the narrative, Isabella launched a preemptive strike. She orchestrated a carefully managed, exclusive interview with a sympathetic journalist from a major society magazine. The photo shoot took place in the penthouse, which the court had granted her temporary access to for this specific purpose. She posed in Lily's immaculate bedroom, her expression a perfect blend of maternal sorrow and steely resolve. The article, published online just a week before the gala, was a masterpiece of manipulation. In it, Isabella painted Marcus as a grieving, work-obsessed husband who had become paranoid and unstable following his daughter's unfortunate accident. She was the long-suffering wife, trying to hold her family together against her husband's irrational behavior. "It breaks my heart," she was quoted as saying, a hand placed delicately over her chest. "Marcus is a brilliant man, but he's struggling, and in his pain he's lashing out. All I want is for our family to heal, for Lily to have the stable, loving home she deserves. I pray for him every day." The article was filled with veiled references to her own philanthropic work, her deep commitment to children's causes, subtly reinforcing her public image as a saintly figure. It was a brilliant countermove, designed to muddy the waters and garner public sympathy. To those who knew only her public persona, she was a tragic, heroic figure. The story caused a ripple of gossip through their elite social circles. Whispers began to circulate. Poor Isabella. Marcus must be having a breakdown. The pressure of his empire must have finally gotten to him. Isabella felt a surge of confidence. She had seized the narrative. She believed she had inoculated herself against whatever Marcus was planning. Her focus now turned entirely to the Thorn Foundation Charity Gala. It was no longer just a social event. It was her stage for ultimate vindication. She doubled the budget for flowers, hired a world-renowned string quartet, and ensured the guest list included every major power player in the city. This would be her definitive statement. She would stand on that stage, the embodiment of grace, charity, and resilience, and cement her status as the victim, the survivor, the benevolent queen of their social world. She would make it impossible for anyone to believe she was capable of the things Marcus might accuse her of. It was the ultimate act of hubris, the fatal miscalculation of a narcissist who could not conceive of a world where her lies would not prevail. She was so focused on polishing her crown that she never thought to look for the guillotine being erected right behind her throne. The gala would be her masterpiece, her triumph. She was sure of it. The night of the gala was a spectacle of wealth and influence. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel was transformed into an ethereal wonderland of white orchids and shimmering crystal. Hundreds of guests in black tie and couture gowns drifted through the room, their laughter and conversation a low, pleasant murmur under the soaring ceilings. At the center of it all was Isabella Thorne, a radiant vision in a custom-made silver gown. She moved through the crowd with the effortless grace of a monarch, accepting compliments, flashing her perfect smile, her every gesture a study in practiced elegance. She was at the apex of her power, surrounded by her court, adored and admired. She felt untouchable. Marcus arrived just as the main course was being cleared. He did not use the main entrance but came through a private service corridor, as arranged by David. He wore a simple, perfectly tailored black suit, his presence a stark, somber contrast to the glittering frivolity of the event. He didn't speak to anyone. He simply stood in the shadows at the back of the ballroom, a silent, imposing figure, his eyes fixed on the stage where Isabella was about to speak. His calm was absolute, the chilling stillness of a predator that knows its prey is already caught. The house lights dimmed. A spotlight found Isabella as she ascended the few steps to the podium. A wave of warm applause washed over her. She beamed, placing a hand over her heart in a gesture of humble gratitude. Thank you all so much," she began, her voice smooth and resonant, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. To see so many generous hearts gathered here tonight, all in the name of helping the most vulnerable children in our city. It fills me with more hope than you can possibly imagine. She spoke beautifully, her words weaving a tapestry of compassion and duty. She talked about the sacred trust of protecting the innocent, the moral obligation of the fortunate to shield the unfortunate. It was a breathtaking performance of hypocrisy. As she reached the crescendo of her speech, preparing to announce the record-breaking fundraising total, Marcus began to move. He walked from the back of the room, his steps measured and deliberate. A ripple of whispers followed him. Heads turned. The focused energy of the room shifted. Isabella, momentarily blinded by the spotlight, didn't see him at first. She faltered, her smile tightening as a murmur went through the crowd. He walked directly to the side of the stage and ascended the stairs, stopping a few feet away from her. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. "Marcus," Isabella said, her voice a tight, forced whisper. "What are you doing? This is not the time or the place." She tried to laugh it off, turning to the audience. "My husband, everyone." Always so dramatic, her attempt at levity fell flat in the heavy, expectant air. "You're right, Isabella," Marcus said, his voice quiet yet carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. He had not taken a microphone. He didn't need one. This is not the place for drama. It is the place for truth. He looked out at the sea of confused, intrigued faces. "For the past 2 years, you have all known my wife as a dedicated philanthropist, a champion for children. Tonight, I want to show you the work she does when the cameras are off." Isabella's face paled. "Security," she hissed. "Get him off the stage." But the security guards, also pre-briefed by David's team, remained at their posts, unmoving. David Chun, from his seat at a table near the front, gave a subtle nod to the AV technician in the booth at the back of the room. The 2 massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying the Thorne Foundation logo, flickered to black. Then, they lit up with the crystal-clear image of Lily's bedroom. The audience gasped. Isabella stared at the screen, her mouth falling open in disbelief. And then the audio began. Her own voice, cold and venomous, filled the ballroom. "You are a stupid, clumsy little girl. You are just like your mother." Useless, the camera showed her snatching the dolls away from a crying Lily. The sound of her daughter's small, heartbroken sobs echoed through the silent, horrified room. The video cut to another scene. Isabella standing over Lily, who sat before a plate of food. "You don't deserve this. Ungrateful children don't get to eat." The audience watched in sickening disbelief as she took the plate away, leaving the child staring at the empty space on her table. Another cut. The door being locked. The sound of the deadbolt clicking shut. Lily's small hands beating against the wood. Her terrified cries from the other side. "Be quiet. No one wants to hear you. No one is coming for you." Isabella's voice, a cruel, sharp weapon, sliced through the air. The footage played for 2 excruciating minutes. 2 minutes of systematic, soul-crushing cruelty. When the screens went dark, the silence in the room was absolute, profound, and damning. Every eye was on Isabella. Her mask of poise had not just cracked. It had been utterly vaporized. Her face was a contorted mess of shock, rage, and raw, cornered panic. "It's fake!" she shrieked, her voice a shrill, ugly sound. "He faked it. It's all CGI. He's trying to destroy me." But no one was listening. They had seen. They had heard. They knew. Marcus's final blow was delivered with quiet finality. He held up his phone, where a pre-written statement was displayed. "This afternoon," he said, his voice resonating with cold authority. "Dr. Eris Thorne of City General Hospital provided a medical report to the authorities. It details that my daughter, Lily, was admitted with severe malnutrition, dehydration, and injuries consistent with physical abuse. Her psychological condition was diagnosed as resignation syndrome, a state of profound trauma." As he spoke, 2 uniformed police officers, who had been waiting in the wings, walked calmly onto the stage. They moved towards Isabella, their expressions grim and professional. The sight of them, the finality of their presence, broke her. The last vestiges of her control shattered. "No!" she screamed, a wild, animalistic sound of pure fury. "You can't do this to me. I am Isabella Thorne. I am a good person. I love that child." She lunged towards Marcus, her hands clawed, but the officers intercepted her, each taking an arm. She thrashed and fought, her silver gown tearing, her perfect hair falling into disarray. Her rage-filled, pathetic confession echoed through the ballroom as they escorted her off the stage. She was an annoying little brat. She deserved it. She deserved everything she got. The monster was revealed. Her social world lay in ruins at her feet. And as the police car doors slammed shut outside, a new, clean silence fell over the room. The silence of a long-overdue justice finally being served. The downfall of Isabella Thorne was as swift and brutal as her public exposure. The events of the gala became an immediate, explosive news story, dominating every media outlet for weeks. The video footage, leaked from a dozen different cell phones in the ballroom, went viral, a permanent and damning testament to her cruelty. The carefully constructed facade she had spent a lifetime building was demolished in a single night. Her powerful family, horrified by the public disgrace and the irrefutable evidence, disowned her completely, issuing a public statement condemning her actions and offering their support to Marcus and Lily. Her friends vanished. Her name was stripped from charity boards. The social world that had once worshipped her now treated her as a pariah. The legal proceedings were a formality. Faced with the overwhelming video evidence, the testimony of Dr. Thorne, the sworn affidavit from Mrs. Gable, and the expert analysis of the child therapist, Isabella's high-priced legal team could do nothing. There was no defense against the truth. In a desperate attempt to gain leniency, she pleaded guilty to multiple felony counts of child abuse and endangerment. The judge, a stern woman who had watched the video evidence in her chambers, was unmoved by Isabella's tearful, self-serving apology in the courtroom. She sentenced her to the maximum possible term, 20 years in a state penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for at least 15. The sentence was a clear and unequivocal statement that wealth and status provided no shield from justice for crimes against a child. Marcus attended the sentencing, not out of a desire for vengeance, but out of a sense of duty. He needed to see the final chapter of this nightmare close. He watched as the woman who had brought so much darkness into his daughter's life was led away in handcuffs, her face pale and empty, stripped of all her power and pretense. He felt no satisfaction, only a quiet, profound relief. The threat was gone. Lily was safe. That was the only victory that mattered. While the legal system delivered its verdict, Marcus focused on dismantling the last vestiges of Isabella's presence in their lives. The divorce was finalized in record time. He sold the penthouse and all its contents, erasing the tainted memories it held. He purged his companies of anyone who had been placed there by Isabella or her family, severing every last tie. He worked with David Chun to fortify Lily's future, creating an ironclad legal and financial fortress around her that would protect her for the rest of her life. The world saw the fall of a socialite, the dramatic end to a society marriage. But for Marcus, it was a quiet, methodical process of purification. He was clearing away the rubble, sweeping away the ashes, so that on the cleared ground, he and Lily could begin to build something new, something real, something safe. The resolution was absolute. The antagonist was punished, her power destroyed, her name a permanent stain. The system, prodded into action by undeniable truth and righteous anger, had worked. Justice had not only been done, it had been seen to be done publicly and decisively. The storm had passed. The quiet work of healing could now begin. 6 months later, the world of galas and penthouses felt like a distant, half-forgotten dream. Marcus and Lily now lived in a secluded cottage on the coast, a simple, elegant house of weathered cedar and glass that overlooked the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean. The air here was clean and sharp, filled with the scent of salt and pine, a world away from the stale, perfumed air of their old life. There were no locked doors in this house. The wide glass panels slid open to the sea breeze, and the sound of the waves was a constant, soothing presence. Marcus had divested himself from the day-to-day operations of his global empire, delegating to a trusted executive team. His new life was measured not by stock prices and quarterly reports, but by the rhythm of the tides and the slow, steady healing of his daughter's heart. Lily had transformed. With the help of intensive therapy and the unwavering, gentle presence of her father, the silent, frightened child was slowly giving way to the bright, curious 6-year-old she was always meant to be. She had begun speaking again, her voice at first a soft, hesitant whisper, but growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. They spent their days walking on the beach, collecting seashells, and building elaborate sandcastles that the tide would wash away, a daily lesson in letting go. They planted a garden together, their hands in the rich, dark earth, coaxing life from the soil. Marcus, the man who had once commanded boardrooms of 100 people, found a deeper, more profound sense of purpose in teaching his daughter how to tie her shoes and identify constellations in the vast, starry night sky. One bright, sunny afternoon, they were sitting on the porch, drawing. Marcus was sketching the ocean, while Lily was focused intently on her own creation. For a long time, her drawings had been dark and confined, filled with squares and shadows. But lately they had begun to fill with color, with light. She finished her picture and held it up for him to see. It was a drawing of their new house, the cottage by the sea. In front of the house were 2 figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. They both had wide, happy smiles. And above them, a giant, yellow sun filled the entire sky. It was the first time she had drawn a smile. "That's us, Daddy," she said, her voice clear and bright. The light that had been extinguished had been rekindled, brighter and more precious than before. The world is full of polished facades, of beautiful lies that conceal ugly truths. We see the smiling faces in photographs, the perfect families at public events, and we assume that what we see is real. But evil does not always announce itself with thunder and lightning. Often, it whispers from behind a charming smile, hiding in the very places a child should feel most safe. How many silent victims live behind locked doors, their voices stolen by the people who are meant to protect them? And what is our duty when we see the cracks in the facade, when we hear the crying that stops too suddenly? The story of Marcus and Lily is a testament to the ferocious power of a protector's love, a force that can shatter illusions and bring the most deeply hidden darkness into the unforgiving light. It reminds us that true strength is not found in dominance or control, but in the quiet, unwavering commitment to shield the innocent. It is a story of justice, not just in a courtroom, but in the restoration of a child's laughter and the healing of a wounded soul. It proves that even after the most devastating storm, with enough love and patience, a new sun can rise. What did you think of Marcus's journey to uncover the truth and save his daughter? Have you ever encountered a situation where your intuition told you something was deeply wrong, even when everything on the surface appeared perfect? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and your voices deserve to be heard. Thank you for reading, and may you always have the courage to be a protector for the vulnerable among us.